Welcome to your video for Activity 3. Activity 3 is going to help you understand how to find the area of a circle. So in front of you is a blue circle on grid paper. Now, without knowing anything, you actually could find the area of that circle by simply counting the total square units. Now, what gets tricky about that is these ones are all fine to count because they're total and whole squares. These ones get a little trickier when they get to the partial squares. All right, now I actually did count these up, and in a few slides I will show you what I got. All right, but in most cases you are not going to want to count the total squares to find the area. There's got to be a better way, and there is. It's to use the area formula. Well, in order to use the area formula, you have to understand it first of all. In the area formula, it says to find the area of a circle, you need to find the radius squared and then multiply that by pi. So this all looks really strange to me when I'm looking at it. Sure, I could memorize it, but it's better if you understand it. So on the next slide, we're going to go through how do you make sense of this formula. Why do you do a radius square? What's a radius squared? And why do you multiply it by pi? So here is the exact same circle that was on the previous slide. And the very first thing I'm going to ask you is, how many radius squares, which this right here, a radius squared, are needed to cover this circle? All right, so that's the question we're going to try to answer here. Well, here's the radius for you. I did it in green. You can see right here from the center to the outside. Now I could have drawn it anywhere, but I put it here. It just was easier. This radius is 1, 2, 3, 4 units long. All right, so the radius of this circle is 4 units. Now I created a radius square. I took the radius and I made a square out of it. So this radius square is 4 units in all dimensions. This is a radius square, this right here. You take a radius and you make a square out of it, okay? So if the radius is 4 units, like it was here, 1, 2, 3, 4, then a radius square is going to be a 4 by 4. So what that means is this green square covers 16 of these smaller squares right here. And you can kind of see it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 16 of those square units in a radius square. So now go back to my original question. How many radius squares does it take to cover this circle? So far there's 1. It does not cover the circle. There's a second radius circle. You'll notice we have a whole lot of circle here that's not covered. So 2 radius squares doesn't cover it. 3 radius squares. We're doing better, but you can still see there's quite a bit of circle right there that's not covered up. So 1, 2, 3 radius squares, not enough. 4 radius squares. Now 4 radius squares definitely covered up this circle, but there's a problem. So 3 radius squares was not enough. 4 covered it, but too much. If this was the original circle, you can see all this extra hanging off the side here. So 3 radius squares wasn't enough. 4 was too much. I wonder how many radius squares you might need to cover this circle. 3 is not enough. 4 is too much. Hopefully you guessed 3.14, which is pi, and you would be correct. So the way that they came up with this area formula is they created a radius square, and they said, well, how many radius squares are needed to cover any circle? And they realized it was pi. You always needed a little more than 3, but not 4. So that is where they came up with this formula. So like I said a few slides ago, you could just count, and I did. And when I counted this, I got about 48 square units, but I know that I'm not correct because I had a really hard time piecing some of these partial squares together. Let's try to find the area using the area formula. Well, we discovered that to find the area of any circle, you can create a radius square, And then you will need about 3.14 of those in order to cover the circle. So in this particular circle, the radius is 4. You can see it right here. But I need a radius square. So 4 squared is 4 times 4, which is 16. That means that a radius square will cover 16 of these grid squares. Well, I know I'm going to need more than one radius square. We discovered in the last activity, I need pi of them. So I'm going to do 16, which is the radius squared, times 3.14. And you end up getting 50.24, or 50 and 24 hundredths square units. Not too bad. My approximation of 48 was not too bad. But to get even closer, the area of this circle is about 50 square units.